Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Speak Crime to Me. My name is Elena. So on today's episode, I am going to recap day 11 of the Murdaugh trial. It was a very interesting day to say the least, so let's get after it. Started the day off with Megan Fletcher back on the witness stand. As you remember yesterday, she is an expert in GSR. We started the morning off with the defense. How they started is basically getting her to say that gunshot residue can stay on an inanimate surface forever. She also agrees that GSR on hands could be from a gun that Alec Murdaugh had retrieved at Moselle. As we know, he tells the 911 operator he's going to get a gun. He doesn't feel safe. They also get her to admit that she couldn't tell where the particle that was found on the seatbelt, when it was deposited. Then they go back to the raincoat and they get her to admit that the raincoat could have a lot of particles from Alec Murdaugh's father tossing it into a truck with a gun. They finally find out that the raincoat is a size large. Then the prosecution goes back and cross-examines her again. They get her to admit that lots of ways GSR on raincoat could have happened. And then that is how the testimony of Megan Fletcher ends. Then we go into the testimony of Annette Griswold. And let me just preference, I felt like she was such a great witness. She articulated all her words. I just felt like anyone could have a connection with her. And she was Alec Murdaugh's paralegal at PMPED. She starts by saying that he's an intelligent lawyer, but that he kept very odd hours. And sometimes she referred to him as the Tasmanian devil. She also says that after the 2019 boat crash, Alec Murdaugh's behavior and demeanor changes quite a bit. She said he was rarely available, always on the phone, and just not his normal self. And that basically Alec Murdaugh did not treat her or a lot of the staff the same after that incident. So here is what starts to get really interesting with her testimony. So she starts by saying that Alec Murdaugh is trying to tell her to write checks to Forge and not Forge Consulting. And she's questioning this. And he's basically telling her that Forge is like a subsidiary company of Forge Consulting. She doesn't really ask a lot of questions after that and just does as he's told. Then she says she starts writing notes in her files that when she would say, let me just mail this out to Michael Gunn, who is, as we know, the CEO of Forge Consulting. And he would be like, no, I'm getting ready to meet Michael Gunn for dinner or blah, blah, blah. And so she would write in her files that like Alec was hand delivering the check. Then on two occasions, one occasion I believe is December 2020, and then another one on January 2021. She is out of the office. So in December, she's recovering from a surgery. She's working from home. And then the second instance, she had left work early. It was a Friday, late, like 5 p.m. She was taking her mom to the eye doctor, and she gets a call from the CFO's assistant and basically asking her a lot of questions like, this isn't making sense. Like, can you give me any more information? Alec Murdaugh would have the legal fees and clients' funds from her cases handled by another person in the office to the fake Forge account. Basically, this person didn't know about the cases, so they had no reason to question what he was doing. But again, they were this other paralegal's cases, so it seems like he was very manipulative and very forward thinking about how he was going to get these schemes done. And then, the prosecution asks her, was the defendant using the opportunity of you being out of the office to push these things through? And she says yes. He would do it a few minutes before 5 p.m. on Fridays, when it was less likely people would pay attention and ask questions. Then she testifies that Murdaugh forged a client's signature on a disbursement sheet in which he stole $125,000 from a settlement that was owed to the client. And one thing that she said that really resonated with me is she was saying she was very protective of her cases and the disbursements, because she felt like it was, once these cases were settled and these clients were getting the money that they deserved and they were owed, it just made her feel, like that was what she was passionate about. She said she was shocked to learn in spring 2021 that Alec Murdaugh had gotten legal fees directly from Mack Trucks. This is the case again with the $798,000. He worked with his buddy Chris Wilson, and she said that she figured that Murdaugh had just lost the check. She said he was almost like what they've been saying about Paul, like he just leaves stuff and he's very forgetful. She says, in quote, I assumed they gave Alec the checks and he lost them. They've misplaced them. They're somewhere in his truck. They're in a file folder. She asked Murdaugh about it, and he tells her that he never got the checks. So she started going back and forth with Chris Wilson, trying to figure out what happened to the missing $792,000 and legal fees owed to the law firm. Actually, Murdaugh says again that Chris Wilson has the money. Then the paralegal says that she reports this to Janine Seckinger. We heard from Janine Seckinger yesterday. She's the CFO. And in quote, she says she was instantly on high alert because it didn't look good, but they were hoping it was a misunderstanding or a one-off. But we both had the nagging feeling of this is not good, something is wrong. So then she starts looking into the possibility that Murdaugh stole that money, the $792,000. She said her daughter overheard her and got really scared for her and says, once you turn this all in, they're going to fire you. Then they go to the night of June 7th. She said she left the office around 5:15. Murdaugh was still there. And then she had her phone on silent, and she woke up in the middle of the night to lots of missed calls from Randy Murdaugh, basically saying to please call him. Something had happened. No matter what time, call him. So she said she immediately did. And when Randy Murdaugh answered, she said he was upset and what's wrong, that she assumed it had something to do with Randy Murdaugh, their dad that was in the hospital because he had just gotten bad news earlier that day. And he said, no, it's Paul and Maggie. They've been shot and murdered. She said that, she went into like mama bear mode. She was worried about Alec Murdaugh and Buster Murdaugh, and that they were watching out for strange cars that were driving by the law firm. And then, like everybody else, she says they kind of stopped talking about these fees. Everybody else, she says they stopped talking about these fees until September 2021. Tells the story that she walked into Alec Murdaugh's office on the afternoon of September 2nd to look for the file folder. And she found it. A check from it floated like a feather to the ground. She picked it up and saw that it was a March check from Chris Wilson for the Mack Trucks case. The check was to Alec Murdaugh. It was the money that Murdaugh had claimed that he never received. And she found this check that he was saying didn't exist. And then she said she just came to the realization that he's been lying the whole time and that he had these funds. He lied to her. And the feeling that she'd been having all along that he was taking the money or had stolen the money was correct. And she says she goes back to the CFO and tells her what happened. And the CFO was also doing her own review of these fees and cases. And then Alec Murdaugh was fired from the firm the next day. The thing that they are One thing that the prosecution is really trying to establish with a lot of these witnesses that are close to him is that he is an avid cell phone user. Sometimes they say he's on his cell phone, he's on his office phone, he's always around on his phone. And remember, from the cell phone records, there was a period of time where I think it was like an hour, and he had no communication on his phone. So they're trying to establish that behavior is very odd. Then again, they played the dog video. Again, I think they're going to play this video in front of all people that know Alec Murdaugh closely. And she says she's 100% sure that it's three voices she hears: Paul, Maggie, and Alec. And then the prosecution shows her a text that she got from Murdaugh on September 26th, weeks after he had been fired from the law firm, saying, "The worst part is knowing I did the most damage to the ones I loved the most." And that's when the cross-examination begins with the defense. This is funny. So the defense starts asking about, like, obviously Alec Murdaugh's character. And, she's like, how did you feel about working for him? And, she's like, I cared about him. I respected him. I loved him. But it was hard to work with him sometimes. He was a bit erratic. For all the love and respect she had for him, it was still very difficult to work for him. And, they start to establish that Murdaugh is a family man. They keep on trying to ask these questions again when the prosecution brings witnesses forward that are close friends or they know Alec Murdaugh pretty well. And they kind of start talking about how Alec Murdaugh never stayed back at the Moselle property. He was staying with family. And they go back to that text message on September 26th, and I guess that was a message that she believed he had sent while being in rehab, and that was part of the program. You've got to send a message to, move forward with, things you've done wrong and apologize and things like that. Basically, in this message, she also admits to, wanting to mend relationships, apologizing again for his misdeeds. And she says, he was trusted by everybody in the community, and they knew that if they needed something, they could reach out to him and he was going to help them. And then she steps down from the witness stand, and the next witness for the prosecution is Michael Gunn. He is the principal of Forge Consulting, the firm Murdaugh impersonated to steal from his clients. They just talk about the difference between the real Forge Consulting and the fake Forge Consulting. Did you ever meet Alec Murdaugh in the middle to pick up checks? Did he ever drive to you to pick up checks and that kind of thing? And he's like, no. And then cross-examination from him is just, again, that he was a family man. He was really broken after the funerals and things like that. And the state's next witness is a SLED computer crimes agent, Brian Hudak. Probably butchering his last name, so I apologize. And then as they start bringing him on the stand, the judge says, I need to put the jury back to the jury room, and they leave. And then he says that they need to evacuate. We find out later that the building got a bomb threat, I think specifically in the judge's chambers. So that stopped the trial for a couple of hours today. And while they're excused for taking care of this bomb threat, Forge Consulting basically puts out a statement that they are going to take action against Alec Murdaugh because he basically used their name to defraud millions of dollars from his clients and colleagues. So just an interesting thing. I think this has been around the rumor mill for a bit, but it's officially official. So court is back in session, and we resume testimony with the Hudak. He is here to testify about Alec Murdaugh's vehicle, the 2021 Chevy Suburban, which he drove to the crime scene on the night of the murders. He says that SLED didn't have the tools necessary to analyze the car and sent them off to examine it. He steps down. So the prosecution's next witness is Dwight Hakashi. He is an FBI electronics engineer in the Electronic Device Analysis Unit. He extracts data from automotive systems and puts them into a readable format. He testifies that data on Murdaugh's work-issued Chevy Suburban was encrypted, meaning it could not be unlocked and read without a key. That is very rare for vehicles. But the FBI broke into it anyway after approximately 1 year. He says that the FBI found call logs, contact lists, a little bit of location data in the Suburban. Remember, Suburbans have that OnStar service? Also testifies that the FBI found data indicating the state of the Suburban, including whether the car was moving, whether doors were open or closed, whether windows were up and down, etc. It says through meticulous testing, including by test driving another 2021 Suburban, the FBI was able to determine how to read Murdaugh's vehicle. They could tell whether the car was parked or not, but not necessarily if it was moving. He goes on to say that the FBI found 2 calls on the Suburban system on the night of June 7th, when Murdaugh phone was connected to the vehicle. One to 911 at 10:06 p.m. and another to 911 4 seconds later. So here are a few takeaways from the data of the Suburban. At 9:03 p.m. on June 7th, the SUV system boots up. It could have occurred when the door was opening. At 9:06 p.m., the SUV cranks up. A second later, the SUV is taken out of park. And then at 9:22, the SUV is put back into park. He can't say whether the vehicle is moving when it's out of park, just that it is out of park. At 9:43 p.m., the SUV is taken out of park. About 21 minutes after it was put into park. Correlates with Murdaugh leaving Alameda after visiting his mother. Remember, the caretaker said 20 minutes. That was about 21 minutes, and Murdaugh is telling her, no, I was there 30 to 40 minutes. At 9:43 p.m., the SUV goes back into park, so it was out of park for under a minute. Can't say whether the vehicle moved or not. Then at 9:44 p.m., the SUV goes out of park again, so about a minute later. At 10 p.m., the SUV goes back into park, so it was out of park for 16 minutes, leaving Alameda to return to Moselle potentially. 10:01, the SUV goes to park. At 10:01, the SUV goes back into park 12 seconds later. 1 second later, the SUV goes out of park. And then about 13 seconds later, the SUV goes back into park. Then at 10:04, so about 3 minutes later, the SUV goes out of park. Then at 10:05, so about a minute later, the SUV goes back into park, a little more than a minute, driving from Moselle main house to the kennels. Then at 10:11, the SUV goes out of park. A minute later, the SUV goes back into park. Is that possibly him returning to Moselle to get the shotgun? Then at 10:13, the SUV goes out of park, so that could be him driving back to the kennels. And then no log messages indicating when it went back into park. He says sometimes the system stops recording, but the reason is not clear. So just to sum that up, like I had said, this movement shows that he was at his mother's house for about 21 minutes. So the caretaker was about right on with her time. And then it shows 16 minutes to and from Alameda. That is a lot of information because it shows us his coming and goings that night and kind of proving his movements and what other people have said. And then The prosecution ends. However, they don't really connect the dots for the jury. And again, remember, they don't have notebooks. So that is a lot for a juror to really remember. The defense attorney starts their cross-examination. They established that the Suburban's data was encrypted by a manufacturer, not Murdaugh. So again, how they said it was weird how it was encrypted, that's not normal. Tomorrow we'll start the day off with the prosecution cross-examining this vehicle witness, and we'll have to see what else is in store. So as usual, drop your comments below, and thank you again for joining me here on Speak Crime to Me. Until next time.